This is a channeling from Adama on the nature of existence. Now, before we dive into today's lesson, I would like to give a brief explanation about the topics I will be covering tonight. For when I say the nature of existence, this is indeed a very broad umbrella term and may encompass many different topics. However, tonight we will start at the widest part of the umbrella, shall we say, and we shall talk about the existence of the higher self or the soul in its purest form. For there are many on earth, this channel included, who are slightly confused about the nature of star seeds and how one can be incarnated on this earth but still have a lifetime in between incarnations as well. And I have a few answers for this beyond the ones that the channel is currently aware of. Now, also, I will speak briefly further about incarnation, which I have spoken about previously in the channeling on the path to enlightenment. However, we will be speaking of karma and incarnation in perhaps a slightly different manner and perhaps a more broad manner, or we may be looking at it from 30,000 feet, as you guys say. But first, I would like to explain how existence came into being. For indeed, existence is a very broad term, and first we must define it in the context of this lesson. For indeed, the word existence may have very many other definitions in many other contexts. However, in this context, we are referring to the souls created by the source and the creator energy that they chose to bring into existence so that they could experience themselves, so that they could learn what it is like to exist. For existing in a vacuum is no existence at all. So they created children, as they call us, or offspring, or souls of smaller sizes that had the potential to grow into souls that are the size and capacity of the creator and source. However, their lifetimes, if you will, or their evolutionary cycle is, in terms of linear time, almost inconceivably long. However, outside of the third dimension and in this incarnation, it is of no matter to any soul, for time and space are merely an illusion. Now, the channel has expressed curiosity about this phrase, for she is aware how time is an illusion, but she is not quite aware how space is an illusion. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what I mean by an illusion, I would like to first say that time and space are limited only to the third dimension and those dimensions below it. For anything above this third dimension, one will have access to the pure light and energy of Source Creator, so they may overcome these illusions, as we say, of time and space, because they only exist in the third dimension and below. Now, the way in which time is an illusion is similar to the way Let me rephrase this. I would like to explain how time is an illusion, and the best way to do so is to make an analogy to a roll of film. So if you have a roll of film like in the olden days, such as the first movies, each film was created of a bunch of snapshots that, when played through light at an extremely fast rate, would produce what you guys call a video, or a picture that moves or appears to move. Now, this is similar to how one may view time, and one may view the whole of time, all of time from the beginning of creation until the very end of creation, if there ever will be one, as one continuous reel of film. And each individual moment in each person's life, in each being's life, throughout all of time and space, is one individual frame on the roll of film. And when you are incarnated, or when you exist, or let me rephrase. When you are incarnated here on Earth, you experience this film roll of time, if you will, in a very linear manner, meaning you experience one frame at a time. So it is indeed very similar to if you were playing a movie through an old film projector. Each moment is lit up by the light of your consciousness, and indeed you do have free will, so you may change the way that this film plays out. However, each possibility for every single choice and every single combination of choices you may make exists in an alternate reality. And indeed, this is where parts of the other parts of your soul, or some of the other parts of your soul, are incarnated in this lifetime. And traditionally, as one moves through their lifetime, if they are Pardon, this thought is difficult to put into words. So as one moves through their lifetime, contrary to as one may think, after a certain point in one's life, the possible outcomes, the possible alternate pathways that they take may dwindle. For as one pursues the path of enlightenment, their soul consolidates, and their soul may find that other lower frequency forms of themselves cease to exist. Now, there are many ways in which parts of oneself in alternate realities, as you say, may cease to exist. And for the case of this channel, as she has recently learned, one of the ways is by suicide. For in many of this channel's alternate reality lifetimes, this channel committed suicide at the age of 19. Sorry to take it dark there for a second, you guys. Didn't expect that turn. Wow. But other ways that one may say get rid of or assimilate their lower vibrational selves from the alternate realities into the higher self, or from the lower vibrational alternate realities into the higher self, is by Mother Gaia's frequency increasing above the rate that that person is capable of vibrating at, or that version of that person in that incarnation is capable of vibrating at. So say, for example, there is somebody who is extremely low vibrational, and as the Earth's vibration increases naturally, they may no longer be capable of existing in the physical environment on Earth created by Earth's new higher vibrational frequencies. So this person may seem to phase out of reality altogether. However, I would like to note that if you are alive and experiencing this incarnation, there may be versions of you who have done this, but that does not impact this incarnation. However, you may indeed be able to reach out to not only the people in those incarnations, or the people who you knew in those incarnations before you ceased to exist in those realities, but also you may reach out to yourself in alternate realities, as well as yourself in the future. For just as yourself in the past can affect yourself in the present, yourself in the future can also impact yourself in the present. Now, one way in which this channel finds that it is easy to do this is whenever you are processing a traumatic memory or a moment that brings up strong, uncomfortable emotions, you in the present may send a feeling of love and comfort to you in the past by simply imagining that you can either see that version of you from the past standing in front of you, or that you are that version of you in the past, and you may tell that version of you what they need to hear, or you may give them a hug, or you may offer some other form of comfort. And indeed, you may even feel these moments occasionally when you go through your day-to-day life if you engage in this practice, and you will know that it is your future self offering you some sort of comfort. Now, one way in which one may experience this feeling of their future self reaching out to them in the present is, for example, if you suffer with loneliness, for example, and you are experiencing a heightened level of loneliness at the moment, and all of a sudden you feel an extreme amount of hope, or perhaps a slight hug, or you just hear words of encouragement or feel a loving presence. This may be your future self reaching out to you to let you know that nothing happens for no reason. There are no such thing as coincidences, and this too shall pass. Now, as for the illusionary, not quite sure that's a word, but we're going to go with it anyways. As for the illusionary nature of space, this is a bit more difficult to describe, so this part of the channeling may be a little bit less accurate, so please bear with us, for the channel is trying her best. However, there are not many words in the English language to describe these concepts, and also the channel is more unfamiliar with this concept than previous concepts shared, so her vibrational frequency matched to this concept may not be as accurate as usual. But despite this, we shall endeavor to convey this message, and if it comes across horribly inaccurate, we will let you know, and we will try again once the channel has gained more skill. But the fabric of reality, as I have said in a previous channeling, it can be described as exactly that, a piece of fabric. So it is best for us to describe the nature of reality and the fabric of reality, and therefore space in the third dimension, in a two-dimensional manner, for it is almost impossible for most three-dimensional earth beings to conceive of the fourth dimension. So we shall use the example of shadows again. For a shadow is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object. So in this case, we will use a two-dimensional object, a piece of fabric, to represent a three-dimensional object, the space of reality in the third dimension. And we will use a three-dimensional object, which will be movement through the third dimension of the fabric, to represent the fourth dimension, or movement through the fourth dimension, or higher dimensions. However, the higher dimensions are irrelevant in this case, so we will just stick with the fourth dimension. But when conceiving, or when thinking of the idea of the fabric of reality, you may think of a piece of fabric. And just like the piece of fabric has ridges and bumps to it, you may imagine that this is the fabric of reality, and there are tiny people that represent you living among the ridges of this fabric. Indeed, quite an amusing and perhaps even trippy, as you say, visual, but it serves our purposes nonetheless. So you will imagine this tiny civilization in the fabric, and you may also imagine the beings in the higher dimensions as being represented by beings in the third dimension. So, in order to explain the relativity and therefore illusionary nature of space, you may imagine that these beings in the higher dimensions, in this metaphor, the third dimension outside of this fabric, are able to manipulate the fabric without the full knowledge of those beings inside of the fabric. So say, for example, a being outside of the fabric decides to stick a pin inside of the fabric. To the beings inside of the fabric, it will appear as if this pin just spontaneously came into existence out of nowhere. However, the being outside of the fabric, in the higher dimension, will be aware that the pin was there the whole time, and it merely entered the bandwidth of the fabric. Now, to explain teleportation in another manner, you may imagine that one pushes together two pieces or two different sides of the fabric and wrinkles them up in reality. So to the beings inside of the fabric, they will not be aware of them being wrinkled up, for their awareness is purely inside of the fabric, and they're not aware of anything else outside of the fabric, including their movement relative to the space around the fabric. And this is the case for most of the beings incarnated in the third dimension as well. But if you were to insert a pin in one location and then remove it and put it into a pin very close to where the original location was while the fabric is still wrinkled up, and then you straighten up the fabric, you may find that the two locations where the pin has entered the fabric are very far apart. And to the beings inside of the fabric, they will only be able to witness the pin moving from that one initial spot to the secondary location. And so this will be perceived by the beings in the fabric, and therefore the beings in the third dimension in this, or the beings that represent the beings from the third dimension in this metaphor. And they will not be able to perceive the higher dimensions, and it will appear to them as teleportation. But I hope that explains the nature of space in a comprehensible way, for it is difficult to explain this this concept in terms that the third dimensional brain will be able to comprehend. For indeed, the third dimensional brain may limit one's capability to comprehend information, even if their consciousness may comprehend information that their brain may not. And I'm aware that this may seem a bit contradictory. However, I will speak to this in a later channeling, and you need not worry yourself with it now. However, back to the nature of existence. I would like to explain the general overarching nature or perhaps trajectory of one's existence in the most generalized terms possible. Now, before I begin this lesson, this part of the lesson, I would like to say that this is not the case for all beings. However, this is the most common underlying theme in one's progression through existence. So I will only speak to this one path for the moment, and if the need arises, I shall speak to the others at a later time. However, when one's soul is created by Creator Source, it initially starts out as pure energy. And in order for this energy to be able to perceive itself, to differentiate itself from Source, it must undergo some form of an incarnation. Now, the majority of these beings choose to incarnate in the lower dimensions, for this is a good foundation, as they say, and it allows one to see their own existence under the guise of the veil of forgetting and also free will. For one's free will in the higher realms is not quite of the same nature as one's free will is in the lower dimensions in many of the incarnations. However, this is not the case for all third dimensional civilizations, but indeed it is the case for Earth. But many of these beings will choose to incarnate, for example, as elementals. So many beings whose first incarnation it is, and who were just spawned from Source Creator, may choose to be a rock or a flower or a flame or some other fleeting incarnation that is not overwhelming to their soul, but still allows them to dip their toe into the pool of incarnation and receive a brief or experience a brief moment of their own nature through a set of fresh eyes. However, this is not the case for all souls, especially considering the current movements on Earth at the moment. And there are more souls than almost ever before that are currently incarnating on Earth directly from the Source. And indeed, this channel does know one such soul and recognized this soul's nature almost immediately. These people may come off as very youthful in energy, very carefree and playful, and they may not subscribe to societal norms in the way that most people do. And some of these souls may indeed be on the autism spectrum or be labeled as being on the autism spectrum due to their lack of conformity to these social norms. However, this is not the case for all, and not all of these beings are on the autism spectrum, and not all beings on the autism or who are labeled as being on the autism spectrum are incarnated on Earth for the first time directly from Source. However, for the majority of souls who are labeled as autistic, many of them have either had a very, very large number of lives on this earth and are very aware, or this is their very, very first lifetime on earth. And many of them are coming from very high vibrational realms, and their nervous systems do not quite have the capabilities to process all of their high vibrational soul's energy quite yet. But this is not a mistake or an accident, for these souls knowingly chose to come and incarnate in this form to allow their presence to aid in the three-dimensional Earth's ascension to the fifth dimension. And this being said, almost all hardships or challenges or traumas are chosen before one incarnates on this earth. However, for some, they may be chosen by karma, but ultimately their soul did agree to play the game of karma, as you say, before they incarnated here on earth. So indeed, your soul did consent to this, no matter how harsh this may seem. And indeed, I am aware of how harsh this may seem, for your world at this moment is a very dark and dismal place, or it can be at least. And indeed, many places on your earth, or on the surface at this current place in time, are very tumultuous and perhaps even dangerous to a certain extent. But you need not fear, for as I have said just a moment ago, there are no accidents, and everything happens for a reason, no matter how difficult or traumatic the experiences you may undergo may seem. Know that your soul agreed to this before it incarnated on this earth. And indeed, many souls choose to incarnate on many different planets and in many different dimensions. And not all of these incarnations have the aspects of this incarnation, as I have mentioned in previous channelings, such as the ego, the veil of forgetting, and the Ka. Now, there may be other versions of Ka for each individual planet, or for some of the other individual planets on which one may incarnate. However, this is not always the case, and it is purely dependent on not only the vibrational frequency of the planet, but also the purpose of that incarnation. And there are many different reasons that one may incarnate, and there are many different lessons that one may learn through different incarnations. For example, if one decides to learn how to incarnate through if one decides to incarnate through a tree in your earthly dimension, then they may be choosing to learn the lessons of stillness and of observation. For as you are very aware, trees are not very mobile, nor are they very talkative, at least in a physical sense. However, if you are able to connect to the tree spirits, they often have quite a bit to say. As long as they are not, actively resenting the humans, as some of them do seem to do on occasion. But that is a story for another time. Now, after a soul undergoes its first incarnation, it may then choose to undergo more incarnations, or it may choose to go live as a pure energetic form among the cosmos. And indeed, there are many different things that one soul can do while existing in its pure energetic form, and incarnation is merely but one option. Now, another option is to choose a star system to live in, and this is where one's galactic lineage comes from. And if one is a star seed, or one's soul is not initially from Earth, then they may find that their soul has chosen a galactic family. Now, I say chosen, for although one may be born into a galactic family, one's soul may also choose to be embodied into, or perhaps embodied is not the right word, for that is a bit too physical, but one's soul may choose to change its nature into that of a specific galactic race. And this is usually the case for the highest vibrational soul, or for the highest vibrational beings. And indeed, some of the ninth dimensional Arcturians choose to procreate in this way. And this is a very etheric and non-physical form of reproduction. However, it is still somewhat a form of reproduction, because to a certain extent, the parents that are chosen for the soul to incarnate into this galactic lineage will indeed impart some of their features and genetics, if you will. For genetics are not truly a thing in the higher dimensions, but there is no better term for it in English, or at least in the third dimension, onto this soul. They will impart these parts of themselves onto the new soul that is being inducted into the lineage when the induction occurs. And indeed, this may be likened to being inducted into a coven of witches, or even a secret society. For you become brothers and sisters of spirit, and not necessarily of blood, for blood is not necessarily, it's not a thing in the ninth dimension. Right, it's not very eloquent, but it gets the point across. Now, even after one has chosen to associate with a specific galactic lineage, they may choose to incarnate. For their galactic parents may indeed spend some time initiating the soul into existence and teaching them the ways of existence. However, occasionally the soul comes to the galactic lineage a bit more wizened or seasoned, if you will. For the soul may choose to wander around the cosmos and observe and interact in the limited ways that it may as pure energy in the cosmos. Or perhaps limited is not the right way to say this, for all of the beings in the higher dimensions are pure energy. However, until the spirit has chosen some form of direction for its existence, it may the most of its capabilities may be limited to observation. And at this point in the soul's evolution, the soul is still very connected to source and creator. However, once the soul chooses a galactic lineage to associate with, then the parentage, if you will, the parenthood of the soul will be handed down from source creator to the chosen parents in the galactic lineage. Now, this is not the case for those on Earth, for those on Earth are not capable of, or at this moment are not capable of reproducing in this way. However, this is rapidly changing, and we hope that some of the newer generation, perhaps even this channel included, may be able to have conversations with the soul that they will birth before they birth them and before they conceive of them. And if you question this, I recommend you remember the fluid and perhaps illusionary nature of time. Again, illusionary, don't think that's a word, but I guess we're making it one. But when one incarnates on Earth, they do indeed choose their parents before incarnation. And their parents, to a certain extent, must agree to take on the specific challenges that will come with raising this specific soul. However, ultimately, it is the child that chooses the parent. And I know this may be a harsh truth to hear for some who have perhaps less than ideal parents, or perhaps emotionally immature parents. However, again, I would encourage you to realize that there is a lesson to be learned in everything, no matter how harsh it may seem. And if you find yourself doubting why your higher self would choose this path for you, you must only look inwards and find the answer within yourself. However, be aware that it may be buried below a few layers of bullshit, as this channel would say. But I would call that trauma and perhaps even emotional baggage. Sorry if we just called you out. Didn't mean it, but also kind of did. But that being said, if one chooses to incarnate on this earth, the nature of their relationship with their parents will be much different from the nature of their relationship with their galactic parents or their soul pod parents. However, both sets of parents are chosen. Now, the nature of existence is different from the nature of incarnation in a few different ways. For the nature of existence encompasses one's entire higher self in its purest form. And indeed, there are some beings here on Earth who are purely earth beings. However, they are few and far between at the moment, for much of the population on Earth currently is seeded from the different star systems among the Galactic Federation. And for those who are unaware, the Galactic Federation is a group of high-dimensional beings who have joined together to promote peace and love throughout the cosmos. And after World War II, we received a call from the higher dimensional beings here on Earth, who are known as the Telosians and the Agarthans, that the humans of the third dimension on Earth were messing around with things that they should not mess around with. Now, once this call was answered, many beings from other star systems began incarnating here on Earth, at first in small increments and then more and more. And for more information about this, Dolores Cannon has written many books about this, and she calls this movement the 3 waves of volunteers. However, this is a very concrete and black and white version of this movement, for it was more of a gradual progression and less of 3 waves. But either way, the information that she provides is still very relevant and very beneficial to one's complete knowledge of this subject. So if this interests you, Dolores Cannon is a great resource for this material. And indeed, she has passed on, so if one wishes, they may connect directly with her soul in the purest form by inviting her into their practice. Now, although Miss Dolores is not an ascended master, she still does have access to a lot of beneficial information in the higher dimensions, and she may prove to be a valuable spiritual mentor for those who are inclined to reach out to her and who resonate with her message. And indeed, one is able to do this with any being who has passed on. For after one has passed on, the part of their self that was incarnated on this earth still remains to be a part of their soul. So, for example, once Marlena dies, the part of her that is Marlena will still remain as Marlena in her soul. However, never again will this soul be incarnated on earth, and it will be enmeshed into the rest of her soul in a more complete and unified way. And similar phenomenon to this can be found in your psychological practice of IFS, internal family systems. For this belief operates under the belief, that's redundant, but whatever, under the belief that one is composed of different parts. So, for example, if somebody hurts your feelings, but you care deeply about that person, there may be a part of you that is hurt by their actions, but there also may be another part of you that understands their actions and has compassion for them. But similarly, there may be another part of you that feels confused by their actions and doesn't understand how they could act like that. And so this is an example of the mosaic nature of the soul, for all parts combine to create a whole. And indeed, this is an example of as above, so below, as within, so without. For as within the soul in this incarnation, as without. So, oh my gosh. Let me try that again. As it is within the soul in this incarnation, it is so outside of the soul in the higher realms, in the soul's purest form. There we go. That was better. But that being said, even after one has passed on from this life, that part of their soul may still come back with the same personality, or that soul in its fullest form, the higher self, may come through for other beings that are still incarnated here on earth. And this is indeed the case with Yeshua, commonly known as Jesus Christ. So if one resonates with the teachings of Jesus, but perhaps does not agree with the church or the way that the Bible is used in current times, which are the beliefs of this channel, then one may still reach out to Yeshua and receive his teachings without the influence of the church. However, contrarily, if one is within the church and practicing Christianity or Catholicism actively, or any of the other major religions that believe that Jesus Christ was a prominent figure, then they may also reach out to Yeshua in this way and receive his teachings in the exact same way as somebody who is not a part of that religion. So I say this to denote the universal nature of these teachings, and note that as long as one is aligned with love and growth, then they may receive these teachings. And similarly, as long as one is aligned with love and growth, you may ask to come visit us here in Telos. And in case you haven't gotten sick of us advertising Telos like some kind of brochure for a vacation home, here it is again. Feel free to come visit us in Telos. But we do have quite a bit of knowledge to offer here in Telos, and as I have said before, our faculties are underused, so please come visit us. And to visit us, you need only ask to come visit Telos before you go to sleep at night. And while you are asleep, whether you are aware of it or not, a being from Telos will bring you here to our Jade Temple to undergo any kind of healing or learning which you desire. Now, those of us in Telos are perhaps a step between incarnation and existence, for although we are incarnated on Earth, we have embodied quite a bit of our higher selves into this incarnation, and we have formed our own Lemurian galactic lineage. Now, there are other beings who are incarnated on Earth at the moment who have a galactic lineage of Lemuria, but are still incarnated in the third dimension, and this is because they have not quite learned all of the lessons of the karma and the vibrational frequency of the third dimension. However, those of us here in Telos and in the Agarthan network have indeed learned these lessons, and we have been allowed to ascend. However, we chose to keep our human bodies and stay here on Earth and form our own new race of souls, our own new galactic race, our own new galactic lineage, for not only the benefit of Mother Gaia, but also the benefit of the human race, of which we were once a part. Now, that being said, if you were to line up the humans that we used to be before the fall of Lemuria and Atlantis next to the humans that you guys are now, there would be very shocking differences. However, as the Earth as a whole makes its ascension into the fifth dimension, you may begin to look more and more like we used to before the fall of these civilizations, or the Great Fall, as we call it here in Lemuria, the new Lemuria, pardon. But that being said, those of us here in Telos may not pass on until we choose to do so. We may not die until we choose to do so. And when we choose to do so, we will return to the state of pure energy and be allowed to choose a new galactic lineage. And indeed, this is uncommon, but we thought this was necessary to form the group of Lemurians as it is now, to aid in the ascension of Mother Gaia. And we do one day hope that the new Lemurians will not exist, and for we hope that they will interbreed, or that we will interbreed with the humans, and then those of us of the original new Lemurian generation, the Telosian generation, will eventually choose to leave our offspring on the earth and continue on into the higher realms. Or who knows, we may decide to live forever with Mother Gaia and join her on her galactic soul journey as she ventures through her own paths of learning and enlightenment. For indeed, Mother Gaia is a creation of Source and Creator, and she does indeed have her own consciousness. And at one point, Mother Gaia was just a floating ball of energy, much like you or I was before we incarnated or chose our galactic soul lineage. However, Mother Gaia was present, or Mother Gaia's consciousness was present at the formation of this solar system known as, or this galaxy known as the Milky Way, and therefore this solar system. And so Mother Gaia chose to embody one of the planets here, and indeed each planet in the entire universe has somewhat of its own consciousness. Now, there are a few planets which lack consciousness. However, for these planets, usually the consciousness of the planet is split up amongst the beings that live on that planet. So this would be like Mother Gaia's consciousness being split up among each of the humans, and each of the humans being of a sort of hive mind or a more collective consciousness than the human collective is at the moment. But that being said, I would like to take a moment to speak more on collective consciousnesses and social memory complexes. Now, for those of you who listened to the previous channeling that spoke on collective consciousnesses, which was the channeling on Key, Spirit, and Source, then you will remember that this channel had a term for a smaller collective consciousness that she could not remember in the moment, and she has since looked it up, and it was called a social memory complex. So a social memory complex would be likened to, for example, everybody who listens to these channelings. If they desire, they may tap into the social memory complex or the very small collective consciousness of the other people who have assimilated this vibrational frequency and who have these vibrational frequencies present in their energy bodies. However, this must be a conscious choice to join a social memory complex, and to join a collective consciousness, this may not always be the case. For a collective consciousness does indeed have the same features of a hive mind. However, colloquially speaking, a hive mind seems to have more amplified traits than a collective consciousness. So, as previously stated, a collective consciousness is a group of souls that all share one similar nature and therefore are able to have a part of themselves combined in a certain way to form a collective. Now, an example of this would be the ants on your planet. So there are many allegories of working like an ant, especially in the Christian faith, for ants are notoriously hard workers and will work even when they are not being supervised. And this is because ants are of a hive mind. So each individual ant does not have its own needs and wants, and it purely wants what the collective wants. And so each individual ant plays a role and does so very happily, and it is very fulfilling for this ant. However, this eliminates free will, for each individual ant does not have the capacity to choose its own path, and it must follow what the collective hive mind chooses for it. However, this being said, due to the nature of this, it is not as distasteful as those of us with free will may think it to be. For again, the souls of those ants chose to incarnate in that way, and they knew what they were getting themselves into. But that being said, when one reaches higher levels of enlightenment, they may connect with the collective consciousness of humanity, but also of these other beings. So, for example, there is a collective consciousness for each animal group on your planet. So, with the exception of a few of the cats, for the cats are sometimes split up into different breeds, or perhaps breeds are not the right term, but different purposes, different goals. For just as different humans come into incarnations with different intentions, so do the cats. And some cats come in to learn lessons. However, some cats come into this incarnation to teach lessons. And so the cats that come in to learn lessons are of perhaps a different collective consciousness than the cats that come here to teach lessons. However, for all the other animals, such as dogs and even all the other animals from giraffes to worms to bears, they all have a unique collective consciousness for each species and for each subspecies as well, depending on how different the vibrational frequencies are between the subspecies. So, for example, dog subspecies do not have their own collective consciousness. However, they do have their own smaller collectives that are perhaps in between a social memory complex and a collective consciousness, and may be likened to the collective consciousnesses of different cultures in humanity. So just like how San Francisco has an extremely different culture from New York, there is a slightly different collective consciousness on a small level for those who live in San Francisco versus those who live in New York. And similarly, golden retrievers have very, very different personalities from, say, a border collie. Or maybe that's not the greatest example, but maybe a Chihuahua. That's a better example. So golden retrievers are of perhaps a smaller, different collective consciousness than a Chihuahua. However, just like humans in San Francisco and humans in New York are still under the collective consciousness of humanity, Chihuahuas and golden retrievers are also under the collective consciousness of dogs. And this is also the case for many other beings in other dimensions and on other planets in other worlds. Now, as for starseeds may indeed choose to incarnate as not only humans, but also animals. So your pets and the animals you see in the streets, the birds, the strays, may have a galactic heritage, and occasionally you will have a member of your soul pod, or not you particularly, but you in the very general sense. One may have a pet that is a member of their soul pod family incarnated as an animal. And sometimes these animals are known in the occult and pagan communities as familiars. However, some people have a tendency to steer clear of this term due to its frequent use in fantasy novels, making it seem less reputable or accurate or believable, I guess. But if you have a particularly strong familial sense with your pet, then you may ask your pet or your higher self or your guides if you have either shared a past life together or if they are a member of your soul family. Now, before we call it quits for the evening, I would like to speak about how one exits incarnation and how one exits existence. For indeed, one may complete the path of existence. However, this is a very intensive path, and in terms of linear time, is almost immeasurable in its length. But this specific incarnation in the third dimension is unique in that it allows one to have the opportunity to extremely bolster the vibrational frequency of their soul. For the lessons that one may learn in this life are very difficult. And if one manages to fully learn the lessons, or fully learn all of the lessons in this incarnation, then they may pass through the initiation of Horus. So the main lessons learned in this incarnation are the lesson of the ego, the lesson of the veil of forgetting, which causes one to forget everything and anything they knew or were or remembered before and after this incarnation. And also the lessons of karma, which keep one tied to this earth until they have fully learned these lessons. Now, once one has learned these lessons, then they may work on awakening their energy body and remembering who they are and what they are in this incarnation. And if they succeed in fully awakening these energy bodies, then upon their death, they may pass through what is known as the initiation of Horus, which allows them to translate these lessons into their soul in a much more tangible way and will allow for the vibrational increase of their soul to occur. Now, during the initiation of Horus, one will be confronted with all of the lessons that they have learned in this life, and this process may indeed be likened to the passing through the 7 layers of hell. However, there are some differences. But this is also where the ancient Egyptian myth of having your soul weighed in the afterlife to determine its weight came from. For the ancient Egyptians carried over bits and pieces of information that was lost during the Great Fall. And this was one of those pieces. Now, if one passes the initiation of Horus, then as I have said, they will be allowed to apply these lessons and apply these vibrational frequencies that they learned and gained in this incarnation in a much more visceral and effective manner than if they had not undergone this initiation of Horus. For the initiation of Horus is very, very difficult, and it also acts as a kind of tying of loose ends of the incarnation. And once one has passed through this initiation of Horus, they usually will find it unnecessary to incarnate again. Usually not only on Earth, but also in any other vibrational frequency or any other lower vibrational frequency planet. For after this initiation is passed, the soul may be of such a high vibrational frequency that they may find it extremely uncomfortable to incarnate in lower densities and lower vibrations for extended periods of time. But during the initiation of Horus, when one is being confronted with all of these lessons and traumas that they have undergone and learned in this lifetime, then, and perhaps even previous lifetimes as well, then they are judged based on not only their initial reaction, but also their response. So they are judged based on how their ka reacts, and or perhaps how their physical body would react if they still had a physical body, and then how their consciousness reacts and talks them through these difficult emotions or these difficult memories or whatever it is that is being shown to them, or however it is that they are being tested. And this is indeed the path that Yeshua paved for all of humanity after his crucifixion. But for the souls who are of the 8th, or for the souls who are incarnated here on earth, who are of the 9th and some who are of the 8th dimensional frequency, may find that if they pass through the initiation of Horus, then they will be allowed to ascend to the God status. And that is indeed the purpose of this incarnation, is to learn to embody the God in the 3rd dimension. And then once one has learned to embody the God in the 3rd dimension and they pass through the gate of Horus, the capability to embody the God will be passed on to their higher self as well. Now, as for what it means to embody the God, that is what these lessons are about. That is why I am channeling this information to and through Marlena, not only to her, but also to those who wish to listen to these lessons. And if you choose to wish into these lessons, if you choose to listen to these lessons, if you wish to listen to these lessons, that's what I was trying to say, and you choose to do so, then I am extremely grateful for your time and effort. For some of this material may not always make sense, but it is beneficial to your soul's evolution, whether you are conscious of it or not, as I have said in previous channelings. But that being said, once one's soul has been allowed to achieve the God status, then they may join Creator Source. And we are not sure what happens beyond that in this form of existence, for it is beyond our comprehension, similar to how it is beyond your comprehension in the 3rd dimension to understand what goes on in the higher dimensions. But either way, there are some theories that state that we will fully immerse with Source and become one with Source Creator again. And there are some theories that say that we will become our own Source Creator, our own Source or Creator, or some say we may become our own Source and Creator, and then be able to experience our own self by creating an existence such as the one that we underwent. Or we may simply exist in the vacuum or float around other higher dimensional realms that we are not aware of in this existence. But that is neither here nor there, for we cannot conceive of that in the higher realms. But I did want to give you an example of how this existence and this incarnation is, as you say, the gift that keeps on giving. For the more we learn, the less we know. And this holds true even in the higher realms. But that is all we have for this evening, and as always, it was a pleasure. Toodaloo.